It was 7:48 p.m. when I pulled into the driveway, my head buzzing with the chaos of a long day at the office. I remember thinking how quiet the house looked, a strange kind of silence, almost unnerving. The lights were dim, and the curtains were pulled shut. Normally, Sarah, my wife, would be bustling about in the kitchen or scrolling through her phone on the couch, pretending she was looking for new recipes. That day, though, the energy felt off. I walked inside, dropping my briefcase on the hallway table like always. As I stepped into the living room, I noticed something odd, a wine glass on the coffee table, lipstick stained, half full, and next to it, another glass. Empty. Sarah was upstairs, I could hear the shower running, but something gnawed at me. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, I just knew. A folded piece of paper caught my eye under the second glass. I hesitated for a moment, my gut tightening. Do I really want to look at this? I whispered to myself. Curiosity won. I reached out, unfolded it, and the words hit me like a freight train. Last night was unforgettable. I've never felt that alive before. Can't wait for the next party, you're my escape from all the dullness. Let's keep this just between us, okay? Winking face, Jake. Jake? Who the hell was Jake? I felt my chest tighten. My hand started trembling, the paper crumpling in my grip. My mind raced as the pieces of a grim puzzle started falling into place. The late-night work dinners, the sudden obsession with self-care weekends, the text messages she'd quickly swipe away when I entered the room, all of it screamed at me now, louder than I could handle. I stormed upstairs. My heart was pounding in my ears as I threw open the bathroom door, steam pouring out into the hallway. Sarah turned to me, startled, a towel loosely wrapped around her. What the hell, Jason, she snapped, pulling the towel tighter around her. What is this? I growled, holding up the note. I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. My eyes burned as I stared her down. Her face froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. Then, like the seasoned liar I now suspected she was, she rolled her eyes. Oh, my God, Jason. Are you seriously going through my stuff now? That's just a stupid note from a friend. Friend? My voice cracked, disbelief laced into every syllable. You're telling me some friend wrote you this? About some unforgettable party? Who's Jake, Sarah? She didn't flinch. Not yet. Instead, she crossed her arms, adopting her favorite defense mechanism, deflection. Why are you being so dramatic? It's nothing. You know I have friends outside of this house, right? Or are you just going to keep accusing me of things with no evidence? No evidence? I threw the note down on the counter. This is evidence. Don't gaslight me, Sarah. Who the hell is Jake? Her expression shifted then, slightly. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw it, fear. She wasn't expecting me to find this. But she quickly recovered, plastering a condescending smirk on her face. You're overreacting, she said. Jake is just someone from the gym. It's nothing. We went to a party once. A bunch of people were there. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Something about her tone, that smugness like she'd already decided I'd forgive her, pushed me over the edge. Don't lie to me, Sarah. I yelled, slamming my fist on the counter. I'm not some idiot you can play games with. Tell me the truth, right now. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw her true colors. She dropped the innocent act completely. Fine, she spat. Yes, I went to a party. A swapping party. So what? It wasn't cheating, it was consensual. Everyone there knew what they were doing. And it's not my fault your father happened to be there, Jason. The world tilted beneath me. My ears rang. What? I whispered. My throat felt dry, the word barely audible. Did I just hear her correctly? My father? She was joking, right? She laughed, bitter and cruel. Oh, don't act so surprised. He was probably the one who told you about it. I mean, he didn't look too shocked to see me there, that's for sure. I stepped back, trying to process what she was saying. My father. My father was involved in this? A swapping party? This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. The sound of her phone buzzing broke the silence. She glanced at it, then back at me, raising an eyebrow. "You done with your little tantrum?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "Because I'm not standing here all night while you play detective. Either get over it or leave." For a moment, I just stared at her, completely floored by her audacity. How could someone be this cold? This manipulative? Every word out of her mouth was like a slap in the face. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. I stood there, frozen, staring at the woman I thought I knew. The woman who used to greet me with a warm smile every evening. The woman I once believed I could trust with my life. And now, she was smirking at me, phone in hand, acting like I was the one overreacting. My blood boiled. "You're disgusting," I finally said, my voice low and trembling with suppressed rage. "You slept with someone else." "No, scratch that, you slept with multiple people. At parties. And my father was there? How do you even justify this to yourself?" She laughed, an icy, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, grow up, Jason. It's 2024. People do these things. It wasn't cheating, it was consensual. You should be thanking me for spicing up my life instead of whining about it like some repressed little boy." "Thanking you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Thanking you for what? Humiliating me? For turning our marriage into a sick joke? For dragging my father into this insanity?" She rolled her eyes, swiping her phone screen like she couldn't be bothered. "You're so dramatic. Honestly, I'm tired of having this same boring conversation. If you can't handle the idea of me having a life outside of you, maybe this marriage isn't for you." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. I felt my hands clenching into fists at my sides, and I had to take a deep breath to stop myself from doing something I'd regret. "This marriage isn't for me," I said, my voice shaking. "Sarah, you've destroyed everything. You didn't just cross the line, you obliterated it. And you think you're the victim here? You're such a hypocrite," she snapped, her tone suddenly venomous. "You think I don't know about the times you've stayed late at the office? Or those little business trips? Don't act all high and mighty, Jason. You're not as innocent as you pretend to be." Her words hit me like a slap. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I've never cheated on you, Sarah. Never. Not once. Every single late night was exactly what I told you it was, work. Unlike you, I actually have some integrity." She laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. "Oh, please. You expect me to believe that? Every guy cheats, Jason. You're just better at hiding it. But you know what? I don't even care. I don't need your permission to live my life." Something inside me snapped. I turned and stormed out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. My chest heaved as I paced the bedroom, my mind racing in a million directions at once. What the hell was I supposed to do now? How do you come back from something like this? How do you look someone in the eye after they've torn your entire world apart and acted like it was no big deal? I glanced at her phone, which she'd carelessly left on the bed. The screen lit up with a notification, a text from Jake. "Can't stop thinking about last weekend. You're incredible. Let's meet again soon." I felt sick to my stomach. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, scrolling through the messages. The texts were explicit, each one more damning than the last. Photos. Videos. Words that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was an ongoing affair, no, lifestyle, that she'd been hiding from me for God knows how long. I didn't even hear her come out of the bathroom until she snatched the phone out of my hand. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Reading the truth," I shot back. "Or should I call it your escape from the dullness? That's what Jake called it, right?" Her face darkened. For the first time, I saw something other than smug indifference. She looked angry. Cornered. You had no right to go through my phone, she hissed. And you had no right to destroy our marriage. I roared. But here we are, Sarah. You lied to me. Over and over. You betrayed me in ways I can't even wrap my head around. And you expect me to just, what? Sit here and take it? She scoffed, tossing the phone onto the bed. You're being so dramatic. It's not like I killed someone, Jason. People do this all the time. You're the only one making it into a big deal. Not a big deal? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You slept with another man. Multiple men. Hell, you might have slept with my father for all I know. And you're sitting here, acting like it's my fault? Her lips curled into a sneer. Oh, grow up, Jason. This isn't some 1950s sitcom. If you can't handle a modern relationship, maybe you're the one who needs to leave. I felt the weight of her words settle on my chest, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Either way, I knew one thing for certain, there was no going back. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension like a gunshot. We both froze, staring at each other. The sound was jarring, almost surreal in the middle of this nightmare. Who could possibly be here at this hour? Are you expecting someone? I asked, my voice flat. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room, her towel still wrapped around her. I followed her down the stairs, every nerve in my body on edge. She opened the door, and there he was, Jake. Jake stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with an air of confidence that made my blood boil. He was exactly the kind of guy I imagined from the texts, cocky, smug, and too polished for his own good. He wore a leather jacket, his hair slicked back like he'd stepped out of some cheesy soap opera. And the way he smiled when he saw Sarah? It was like I wasn't even there. Hey, babe, he said casually, his voice dripping with arrogance. You forgot to text me back. Sarah's face lit up, and for a brief, nauseating moment, I saw the kind of smile she used to give me. Jake, she said, her voice soft, almost affectionate. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I interrupted, stepping forward. That's a damn good question, Jake. Why don't you tell me? Jake's eyes flicked to me, and he chuckled, clearly unbothered by my presence. You must be Jason, he said, extending a hand like we were meeting at a company barbecue. I've heard a lot about you. I didn't take his hand. Instead, I stared at it like it was poison. Get the hell off my property, I growled. Now. Jake raised his hands in mock surrender, smirking. Easy there, big guy. I'm just here to talk. Talk? I repeated, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. You think I want to talk to the guy who's been sleeping with my wife? At that, Sarah groaned, rolling her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, Jason. Can you stop being so embarrassing? Jake didn't come here for this. Oh, really? I shot back, turning to her. Then why is he here, Sarah? To borrow a cup of sugar? Or maybe to take you to another one of your parties? Sarah crossed her arms, her expression hardening. You're acting like a child, she snapped. Jake's here because I asked him to come. I blinked, stunned. You what? Jake grinned, clearly enjoying the spectacle. She needed someone to talk to, he said, stepping into the house uninvited. I'm good at listening. Before I could stop myself, I lunged at him. My fist connected with his jaw, the sound of the impact echoing through the hallway. Jake stumbled back, cursing, but the satisfaction I felt was short-lived. Sarah screamed, grabbing my arm and yanking me back with more strength than I thought she had. What the hell is wrong with you? She shouted, standing between us. Have you lost your mind? I looked at her, incredulous. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you, Sarah? You invited your lover to our house, and you expect me to just stand here and take it? Jake wiped his mouth, smirking despite the blood on his lip. Nice punch, he said. But you might want to save your energy, buddy. You're going to need it. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I snapped. Sarah sighed, clearly exasperated. It means we're done, Jason. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Jake and we're together now. I'm leaving you. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at her, the woman I'd loved for 10 years, as she casually tore my heart out and stomped on it. You're leaving me? I repeated, my voice hollow. For him? She didn't even flinch. Yes. I should have done it sooner, honestly. But I thought you'd be mature enough to handle this like an adult. Clearly, I was wrong. Jake chuckled, leaning against the wall like he owned the place. Don't take it personally, man. Sometimes people just grow apart. It's not your fault. Not my fault? I said, laughing bitterly. You've been screwing my wife behind my back for who knows how long, and you have the audacity to tell me it's not my fault. Jake shrugged. Hey, life's messy. You'll move on. Before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her hands on her hips. Look, Jason, she said, her tone suddenly businesslike. I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. I've already packed some of my stuff. Jake's going to help me move the rest out tomorrow. I think it's best if you're not here when we do. I stared at her, stunned. You're unbelievable, I whispered. After everything we've been through, this is how it ends? With you throwing me away like I'm nothing? She rolled her eyes. Spare me the melodrama, Jason. We haven't been happy for years. This is just the natural next step. The rage inside me boiled over. You haven't been happy? I shouted. You're the one who checked out of this marriage, Sarah. You're the one who lied, cheated, and disrespected me at every turn. Don't you dare put this on me. Jake clapped his hands, drawing our attention. All right, let's all take a deep breath, he said, smirking. No need to make a scene. That was it. I couldn't take another second of his smug face or Sarah's condescending tone. I pointed to the door. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. Both of you. Get out of my house. Sarah hesitated, clearly surprised by the steel in my voice. But Jake just laughed, draping an arm around her shoulders. Come on, babe, he said. Let's go. He'll calm down eventually. As they walked out, Sarah glanced over her shoulder, a smug smile on her lips. Don't wait up, she said. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving me alone in the deafening silence. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to be broken. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that crawled under your skin and made every second feel like an eternity. I stood there in the empty hallway, staring at the door Sarah had just walked out of with Jake by her side. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles turned white, and my chest heaved as I tried to process what had just happened. She's gone. The words echoed in my mind like a cruel taunt. The woman I had built my life around, the woman I had trusted with everything, had just walked out the door with another man. And the worst part? She acted like it was no big deal. Like I was some kind of inconvenience she was finally free of. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. My mind raced with memories, replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I had missed. The laughter, the vacations, the late-night talks, all of it felt like a lie now. How long had she been lying to me? How long had she been sneaking around, betraying me with that smug bastard? My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my spiral. I grabbed it, half hoping it was Sarah calling to apologize, to say this was all some horrible mistake. But it wasn't her. It was my dad. The sight of his name on the screen sent a wave of nausea through me. My father. The man who, according to Sarah, had been at those parties. The man who might have known about her double life this entire time. I hesitated before answering, my voice barely a whisper. Hello? Jason, he said, his tone brisk. We need to talk. I clenched my jaw. Do we? Because right now, I'm not sure I even want to look at you. There was a pause on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. almost ashamed. I know what Sarah told you. And I know how it must sound. How it must sound. I snapped, my anger flaring up again. Dad, she said you were at those parties. She said you knew about everything and didn't say a damn word to me. So yeah, it sounds pretty bad. He sighed, and for the first time in my life, he sounded old. It's complicated, Jason. Look, I didn't know she was your wife when I first saw her there. By the time I realized. You knew, I interrupted, my voice rising. You knew and you said nothing. You let me live in this fantasy while my wife was running around behind my back. I didn't want to hurt you, he said quietly. I thought maybe it was just a phase. Something she'd get out of her system. I didn't think it would come to this. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. A phase? She was screwing other men, probably you too, and you thought it was a phase? Jason, stop, he said firmly. It wasn't like that. I never touched Sarah. I would never do that to you. But yes, I knew she was involved in things she shouldn't have been. And I made a mistake by staying silent. I'm sorry. Sorry? I repeated, shaking my head. You think sorry fixes this? My marriage is over, Dad. My wife just walked out the door with some guy she's been sleeping with for God knows how long. And you just stood by and let it happen. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, he said, you're right. I failed you. But sitting there drowning in anger won't fix anything. You need to think about what comes next. What comes next? The words rattled around in my brain, but I couldn't make sense of them. How was I supposed to think about the future when my entire world had just fallen apart? I can't do this right now, I said, my voice flat. I need time. I understand, he said. But, Jason, don't do anything reckless. Call me if you need me. I hung up without responding, tossing the phone onto the couch beside me. Reckless? What did that even mean? What was I supposed to do, just sit here and pretend like everything was fine? The hours ticked by in a blur. At some point, I ended up in the kitchen, staring at the wine glasses still sitting on the counter. One of them, the one with the lipstick stain, mocked me, a silent reminder of Sarah's betrayal. In a fit of anger, I grabbed it and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, the sound oddly satisfying. As I stood there, breathing heavily, my eyes landed on something else. A small envelope on the counter, half hidden under a pile of mail. My name was scrawled across the front in Sarah's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a few short lines. Jason. I know you're angry, and I know I've hurt you. But you need to understand that this isn't just about us. It's about me finding happiness, even if it means breaking the rules. I hope one day you can forgive me, but for now, I need to move on. Take care of yourself. Sarah, *. The audacity of it. Her finding happiness? At the cost of my life, my sanity, my heart? I crumpled the note in my fist, my jaw tightening. But then I noticed something else, a small, folded piece of paper tucked inside the envelope. A receipt. From a jewelry store. For a diamond ring. The date on the receipt was last week. Suddenly, the air in the room felt electric, like the calm before a storm. My mind raced with possibilities, questions, and one growing certainty: this wasn't over. The receipt burned in my hand like a brand, its presence filling me with equal parts rage and confusion. A diamond ring? Last week? For whom? Sarah already had a ring, our ring. Was it for Jake? Some other guy from her so-called parties? Or was it something even darker, something I hadn't even considered yet? I didn't have time to dwell on it. The adrenaline coursing through me demanded action. Sitting around, drowning in my thoughts, wasn't an option anymore. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house, the cool night air hitting me like a slap to the face. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay still. The jewelry store's name was printed on the receipt, Golden Grove Jewelers, downtown. The time on the receipt suggested it had been purchased during her work-from-home day. The same day she told me she'd been too busy with meetings to even take a lunch break. The lie stung even more now, knowing she'd been out buying a ring while I was busy grinding away to provide for us. The drive felt like a blur, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. By the time I pulled up to the jewelry store, it was already closed for the night, the lights inside dimmed. But there, in the window display, I saw a collection of rings, their diamonds sparkling under the streetlights. One of those could be hers, or rather, his. I leaned against my car, staring at the store as my mind spun. I needed answers, but where would I get them? The receipt didn't tell me who the ring was for, only that it existed. And then it hit me, Sarah's email. She wasn't as clever as she thought, and if I knew her password, which I did, she'd never bothered to change it from Starbucks 123, there might be something there to uncover. Back home, I sat in the dark living room, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the house. I logged into her email, my heart pounding in my chest. This felt dirty, invasive even, but the memory of her smirk as she walked out the door with Jake pushed any guilt far from my mind. The inbox was a mess, filled with promotional emails and unread newsletters. But then I saw it, a subject line that stopped me cold. Order confirmation, Golden Grove Jewelers. I clicked it, my hands trembling. The email confirmed the purchase of a custom diamond ring. It even included a personalized engraving, "To Jake, my forever." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my vision clouded with anger. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She'd bought him a ring. Not just any ring, a custom ring. For Jake. The man she'd been parading around with in my face. The man who had stood in my home, grinning like the world owed him something. I scrolled further, desperate to see what else she'd been hiding. That's when I found the calendar invite. It was scheduled for tomorrow, marked with a single word, event. No details, no location, just the time, 10 a.m. But then I saw the email chain attached to the invite. It was between her and Jake, and their words painted a picture I hadn't fully seen before. "Jake, you sure about this? It's risky. Sarah, trust me. Jason won't do anything. He's too predictable. Jake, all right. Tomorrow's the day, then. Let's make it official." Official? My stomach churned. Were they planning to elope? To sell my house and move in together? Every possibility made me angrier, the heat rising in my chest until I felt like I would explode. But as I scrolled further, the anger turned into something else. Fear. Another message from Jake, "Don't forget the paperwork. If anything goes wrong, we can't afford loose ends." Paperwork? Loose ends? This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was something deeper, something darker. My pulse quickened as I realized I might not even know the full extent of Sarah's betrayal. The woman I'd shared my life with wasn't just cheating, she was plotting something. Something that could ruin me in ways I hadn't even imagined. I closed the laptop, the room spinning around me. I needed to know what this event was, and I needed to stop it before it was too late. My mind raced as I tried to piece everything together. The ring, the calendar invite, the cryptic messages about paperwork. It all pointed to something big. Something final. And then it hit me, the smashed ring and the DNA test I'd found earlier, along with that chilling note, "Tomorrow, your and your baby daddy's lives will change forever." The words I had brushed off as Sarah's sick sense of humor now felt like a ticking time bomb. Tomorrow was the day. Whatever they were planning, it was going down tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And if I didn't do something, I might not have a chance to stop it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of Sarah's smug smile, Jake's cocky demeanor, and the ominous messages that hinted at something far worse than infidelity. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and a gnawing sense of dread. By the time the first rays of sunlight streamed through the curtains, I was already dressed, running on a mix of caffeine and pure adrenaline. I knew I couldn't confront them unprepared. If this event was as significant as the messages implied, I needed to be one step ahead. So I spent the early hours of the morning doing what I did best, analyzing, planning, and preparing for every possible outcome. First, I called a lawyer. It wasn't just any lawyer, but my old college roommate, Ryan, who specialized in family law and had dealt with messy situations like this before. I didn't give him all the details, just enough to explain that I suspected Sarah was planning something that could potentially jeopardize my assets, my name, or worse. "Jason," Ryan said, his voice calm but firm, "if what you're saying is true, you need to gather evidence. Photos, screenshots, recordings, anything that proves her intent to harm you legally, financially, or otherwise. Do you have access to her texts, emails, or financial records?" "I do," I said, thinking of the treasure trove of damning material I had uncovered last night. "Good. Save everything. And, Jason, stay calm. The worst thing you can do is let your emotions take over. You need to think clearly." Easier said than done, I thought, but I nodded anyway. After hanging up, I spent the next hour organizing everything I had. I forwarded her emails to myself, took screenshots of the texts with Jake, and even snapped photos of the receipt and the note she had left. My hands shook the entire time, but I knew this was the only way to protect myself from whatever she was planning. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in my car, parked down the street from Jake's apartment. I'd figured this would be the most logical place for them to meet before their event. Sure enough, at 9:15, I saw her car pull up. She stepped out, wearing a dress I didn't recognize, a sleek black number that screamed, "New Beginnings." Jake was already outside, leaning casually against the doorframe, his smirk as infuriating as ever. They exchanged a few words, then got into Sarah's car together. My heart pounded as I started my engine and followed them at a safe distance. I didn't know where they were going, but I was determined to find out. Whatever they had planned, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. As I tailed them through the city, my mind kept circling back to the DNA test I had found earlier. I hadn't opened it at the time, too consumed by the immediate chaos, but now I regretted it. What if it wasn't mine? What if the child Sarah and I had raised together, my child, wasn't mine after all? The thought made my chest tighten, but I pushed it aside. One crisis at a time. After about 20 minutes, they pulled into the parking lot of a courthouse. My stomach dropped. A courthouse? Were they getting married? Filing some kind of legal claim against me? I parked a few spaces away, watching as they walked inside, Sarah clutching a manila folder and Jake holding her hand like they were walking into their honeymoon. I didn't follow them in right away. Instead, I sat in my car, my fists clenched around the steering wheel. My mind raced with possibilities. If they were filing something, I needed to know what. If they were trying to take something from me, money, custody of our child, or worse, I needed to stop them before it was too late. I finally stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like lead. The courthouse loomed ahead, its glass doors reflecting the morning sun. As I approached, I saw a familiar face exiting the building, my father. My heart stopped. He was carrying a folder of his own, his expression unreadable. He didn't see me at first, but when I called out to him, he froze, his face going pale. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "What the hell are you doing here?" His eyes darted to the side, avoiding mine. "Jason, I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out what?" I demanded. "What are you doing here with Sarah and Jake?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty parking lot. "Because right now, it looks like you're helping my wife and her boyfriend screw me over." "Jason, calm down," he said, his tone pleading. "I'm not helping them. I'm trying to fix this." "Fix what?" I snapped. "What are you trying to fix?" He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he looked me in the eye, and the weight of his guilt was written all over his face. "There's something you need to know about Sarah," he said quietly. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Before he could say more, the courthouse doors swung open, and Sarah and Jake stepped out. They froze when they saw me, their smiles fading. Sarah's eyes darted to my father, then back to me, and for the first time, I saw something that looked like fear. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice cold. What are you all hiding from me? Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Jake stepped forward, his smirk returning. Guess it's time for the big reveal, huh? Jake's words hit like a thunderclap. He stood there, grinning like a man who had just won a rigged game, while Sarah clung to his arm, her confidence faltering for the first time. My father stood awkwardly to the side, his gaze bouncing between us like he was bracing for an explosion. Big reveal? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. You think this is some kind of game, Jake? What the hell is going on? Jake's smirk widened. Oh, it's not a game, Jason. It's just the truth. Something you've been too blind to see for a long time. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. Then enlighten me, I growled. What truth are you talking about? Sarah tugged at Jake's arm, her voice a sharp whisper. Jake, stop. We don't have to do this here. But he shrugged her off. Why not? He deserves to know. In fact, he's waited long enough. He turned back to me, his eyes glinting with a mix of malice and satisfaction. You want the truth, Jason? Fine. Here it is, the kid isn't yours. The words slammed into me like a freight train. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, and all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jake crossed his arms, his expression smug. You heard me. Sarah and I have been together a lot longer than you think. That kid you've been raising? The one you thought was yours? He's mine. The world tilted beneath me. My knees threatened to give out, but I forced myself to stay upright. You're lying, I said, my voice trembling. You're just saying this to mess with me. I wish I was, Jake said, his tone mockingly sympathetic. But the DNA test doesn't lie. Isn't that right, Sarah? I turned to her, my eyes pleading for her to deny it, to say this was all some cruel joke. But she couldn't even meet my gaze. Instead, she looked down, her face flushed with guilt. Sarah, I said, my voice breaking. Tell me he's lying. Tell me the kid is mine. She hesitated for a moment, then finally looked up at me. Jason, she said softly, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Didn't mean for what to happen this way. I shouted, my anger surging back to the surface. You didn't mean to lie to me for years? To let me believe I was a father to a child that isn't even mine? Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not this time. I didn't know at first, she said, her voice trembling. It was a mistake. But by the time I found out, you were already so attached to him. I didn't want to ruin everything. Ruin everything? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Sarah, you've already ruined everything. You betrayed me in every way possible, and now you expect me to just, what? Accept this? Before she could respond, Jake stepped forward again, his expression turning serious. Look, man, I get that this is hard for you, but it's not about you anymore. It's about the kid. He deserves to know who his real father is. And we're here to make that happen. I stared at him, incredulous. You think you're some kind of hero in all this? You think you're doing the right thing? Jake shrugged. I'm just doing what's best for my son. Your son? The words felt like acid on my tongue. You don't even know him. You've been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to blow up my life, and now you want to play dad? Better late than never, he said with a smirk. My father, who had been silent up to this point, finally stepped forward. Jason, he said quietly, this isn't the time for a fight. You need to think about what's best for the child. I turned on him, my anger flaring again. And you, I said, pointing a finger at him. What's your role in all this, huh? Why are you here? He looked away, his expression heavy with guilt. Because I knew, he admitted. I found out about the affair a long time ago. And I've been trying to keep the peace ever since. Keep the peace? I said, my voice rising. You knew my wife was cheating on me, and instead of telling me, you decided to help her cover it up? I didn't cover anything up, he said defensively. I just I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I snapped. You failed. Sarah stepped forward, her hands outstretched like she was trying to calm me down. Jason, please, she said. I never wanted it to end like this. But now that the truth is out, we can all move on. We can figure out what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Sarah, you've been lying to me for years. You've destroyed our marriage, and now you've destroyed my relationship with the kid I thought was my son. How the hell do you expect me to move on from that? She didn't have an answer. None of them did. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the parking lot. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, the events of the morning looping in my mind like a broken record. The betrayal, the lies, the devastating truth about the child I thought was mine, it all collided into a storm of emotions I couldn't contain. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I tried to calm the hurricane inside me. But calm wasn't coming. Not yet. By the time I pulled into a quiet park on the edge of town, the sun was high in the sky, mocking me with its warmth. I sat in the car, staring at nothing, until my phone buzzed. It was a message, from Sarah. Jason, I know this is hard for you, but we need to talk about what happens next. Please come to the house this afternoon so we can figure this out. It's about the child. Let's do what's best for him, okay? I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. What was best for him? That phrase had been thrown around all morning, but no one seemed to care about what was best for me. No one cared about the man who had been blindsided by the people he trusted most. But I knew I couldn't ignore it. As much as I wanted to cut Sarah and Jake out of my life completely, there was still one person who mattered in all of this, the boy I had raised as my own. Regardless of the DNA test, he was still the child I had tucked in at night, the child I had taught how to ride a bike, the child who called me Dad. And now, that relationship was hanging by a thread. I drove home with a heavy heart, not knowing what to expect but determined to face whatever came next. When I walked through the door, Sarah and Jake were already there, sitting at the dining table like they owned the place. My stomach churned at the sight of them, but I forced myself to stay composed. Jason, Sarah said, her voice soft, almost pleading. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down across from them, my eyes locked on hers. Let's get this over with, I said coldly. What do you want? She exchanged a glance with Jake before speaking. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible, she said. Jake and I are planning to move in together, and we think it's important for the child to start spending more time with his biological father. His biological father, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. And what about me? Do I just disappear from his life like I was never there? Of course not, she said quickly. We want you to be involved. But we also think it's important for him to understand the truth. He deserves to know where he comes from. Where he comes from? I said, laughing bitterly. Sarah, where he comes from is me. I've been the one raising him. I've been the one taking care of him while you were out screwing around. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but Sarah held her ground. We're not trying to take him away from you, Jason, she said. We just want to make sure everyone has a fair role in his life. A fair role? I said, leaning forward. You didn't care about fair when you were lying to me for years. You didn't care about fair when you let me believe he was my son. And now, you think you can waltz in here and dictate how this is going to work? No. That's not happening. Jake finally spoke up, his tone annoyingly calm. Look, man, I get that you're upset. But this isn't about you. It's about the kid. We're just trying to do what's right for him. I turned to him, my anger flaring again. Don't you dare lecture me about what's right for him. You don't get to play the hero here, Jake. You're just as much of a liar as she is. Before he could respond, I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady but firm. I'm not going to let you two destroy my relationship with the boy I raised. If you want to be in his life, fine. But I'm not stepping aside. And if you think you can manipulate the situation to push me out, you're in for a fight. Sarah opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pulling a folder out of my bag and tossing it onto the table. These are copies of all the evidence I've collected, texts, emails, everything. If you even think about trying to take me to court or undermine me in any way, I'll make sure every dirty little secret of yours comes out. The swapping parties, the affair, all of it. Do you really want the world to know what kind of people you are? Sarah paled, and even Jake's smug expression faltered. Jason, she said quietly, you don't have to do this. Oh, but I do, I said, glaring at both of them. Because you've taken everything from me. My marriage, my trust, my sense of security. But you're not taking him. I won't let you. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Finally, Sarah nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Fine, she said. We'll figure out a way to make this work. I didn't wait for further discussion. I turned and walked out of the room, my head held high. For the first time in days, I felt like I had taken back some control. The road ahead would be messy and complicated, but I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. As I stood outside, taking in the crisp afternoon air, I realized something. This ordeal had broken me in ways I never thought possible, but it had also shown me a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't just a victim of their betrayal. I was a survivor.